Thanks for staying with us on The Full View as we look back a year later after the July unrest which gripped the parts of KwaZulu-Natal and parts of Gauteng. We're coming to you live from the Springfield Value Centre. This is one of those shopping centres that was not only gutted in the fire but was also ransacked by looters, really brought to its knees as construction behind me really continues to try and chase time as the owners are hoping to have this centre reopened by October to try and make sure that more and more people have jobs. But let's look back at the handling of authorities when it comes to this this unrest. At the same time, you're looking at the floods, you're looking at the fact that some of the businesses were still reeling from the impact of COVID-19. Let's have a conversation with Xolani Dube, who's a political analyst with the Jibera Institute, and Chris Hampson, Director for Centre of Nonviolence at Durban University of Technology. Sviso Shanga, Provincial Office Manager for Santaco in KwaZulu-Natal. Thank you so much to you all for your time. I'll begin with you, Chris. One of the things that really came into sharp focus last year was the violent manner in which everything unfolded. But before we even get there, let's talk about your reflections a year on.
So I believe the population across the board has been traumatized by those events, and we've lapsed into a kind of resignation. The issues of mental health, the issues of people feeling very dispirited. I was teaching a class and I asked my students what trauma meant to them, and my one student said it was small businesses being smashed in July last year. And I think that said so much about how people have experienced these events and the feelings that remain.
And coming to you then, Xolani, because you're listening to what Chris says about what trauma means to some of the students that he's teaching. But at the same time, what did this particular period, you look at the COVID-19 pandemic, you're looking at the unrest, you're looking at the floods, what does it tell us about the kind of tone that we have in the country right now?
Look, I think we have to accept that the condemned, the South African natives, the poor, are the ones who are the victims from colonialism, apartheid, COVID, as well as in the recent violence, as well as in floods. And so it's a clear indication that South Africa's concept of being a country was created around violence, and that violence must be meted to the South African natives. And so moving forward, any violence that you are going to witness, the people who will be the victim of that violence are the South African natives, because that's how South Africa was conceptualized, to say the victims must be the natives.
And I'm going to get to a point where we talk about this violence, Chris, and what it tells us about what happens. But let me bring you in, Mr. Shangase. One of the things that, we see when we look at shopping centers like this one, we can't help but think about where are the taxis, who are they taking to where? Because these centers are closed, people are at home. Let's talk about the impact of the unrest and the floods on the taxi industry.
Thank you very much for the opportunity that you are granting us as Santaco. The impact is so much negative that the business itself has gone down so drastically. One aspect of it all is that our members currently have got vehicles that are being repossessed because we are unable as the minibus taxi industry to pay for those vehicles, because some of them are still owing banks. And the lifestyles at homes have changed drastically for the businesses as well as for the business people within the taxi industry, in a sense that some of the children or the learners and the kids of the owners of the minibus taxis have been able then to be pulled out of school because the owners are unable then to afford. The situation is very dire, especially when it comes to us as minibus taxi operators, when it comes to the plight of COVID-19, the plight of the floods, as well as the unrest or the insurrection which took place.
Let's stay with the unrest, Mr. Shangase, because you mentioned the fact that some of the owners' children have been pulled out of school. But let's talk about the impact that this is having at local level. You think about an area, for example, like KwaMashu, and you think about how bad it's been, KwaMashu Station. What does it mean for local taxis who would have taken somebody from their home to KwaMashu Station? Because that means they're not able to operate. It's only Mhlampe Labo who can be able to take people to town that will be able to operate.
The business has been drastically affected because there aren't any commuters that would have been commuted now to any specific destinations. And what you must also take into cognizance is that the minibus taxi is run and authorized through routes. And if your route is not operating, it means then the work is no longer there for you. And it means there are so many people that are going to be losing work and job. That reflects upon one, the driver is unable now to work. The owner himself, who is a person who is in charge of the business itself, does not have any income or any source of income, not unless they do have another alternative job or work that they do. But to just go straight as a response to your question, the business within the taxi industry is drastically affected by the unrest itself, because people are unemployed and there aren't any commuters that were able then to commute to various destinations.
Chris, let me come to you before I go back to Xolani. The expert panel report into the unrest was, very clear that you cannot read only one incident without the other when you're interpreting what we saw. It talks about the incarceration of former President Jacob Zuma, but it also says you must view what happened within the context of, the socio-economic challenges that are also facing South Africa. We look at what is happening right now, and I wonder, when you reflect, do you think we're out of the woods in terms of potentially not seeing what we saw unfold last July?
So it's very likely that something like this would recur because we have not found ways of addressing underlying factors. But it won't take the same form. Again, I'm certain of that. The report said, and I believe correctly, that this is a multi-dimensional problem. There are different factors that combined in a particular way in a particular time. But we have not addressed the long histories that we come with, and Mr. Dube referred to those. These are long histories with groups that have been divided, often against each other, exploited. And the actual events of July 2021 both severely impacted the local economy, but also intensified inequality within the local economy. With the issue of poverty and hunger is really more extreme than it was even 3 years ago. So we have to find different kinds of processes, and I believe the way ahead is actually to engage in the kind of dialogue which requires some real heart-searching and honesty about what our experiences have been and how we got ourselves into this position.
And when you listen then to that, Xolani, and you think about the what the report calls the racial prejudices in terms of responding to some of what we saw during the unrest, how are the officials doing when it comes to handling the situation on the ground, looking at the floods, looking at the unrest, looking at what exactly has become of KwaZulu-Natal as they try to rebuild?
Look, the most important question is the political will. Do they have the political will to destroy the apartheid and colonialism frame? Because that's where we are operating within that particular frame. I don't think that is that quite easy, the way the things are entrenched, because once you start to challenge the system and the structures, you are challenging the basic architect of South Africa. And I think we need a frank and an honest dialogue, and also us collectively as South African citizens to say, look, let's deconstruct everything that was created by apartheid and colonialism, because it was created based on evil. And if we are prepared to do that, it means that all of us, we must go through hell before we can smile in heaven.
And I'm going to come back as we then wrap up because we don't have a lot of time. Mr. Shangase, let's talk about the impact, as you said, that when one association's route is not operational, they cannot work. Have you been forced, at a practical sense, to share some routes with others in order to try and keep something, coming in a form of livelihoods?
Well, our leadership has been innovative in a sense that since we know how we are structured, we've had engagements with other associations to say, if our routes have been affected, can we then be able then to commute our commuters through your routes? That is meaning en route we could be able then to drop off and pick up passengers. But all in all, the reality is we are very much affected as the taxi industry, and hopefully that is why even when these unrest were starting to probably start afresh, we took a decision that if we would want to see economic recovery, we cannot be able then to accept such a situation from recurring again within the province of KwaZulu-Natal, because it would have meant that our business was going to die its final death if we would have agreed on such. Hence, we then took a resolution to participate on activities that were trying to resuscitate as well as to prevent and prohibit any further damage that would have been done to the businesses.
And I'm going to give you, Xolani and Chris, 30 seconds each as we wrap up. Xolani, how do you see this one play out when it comes to rebuilding the province of KwaZulu-Natal? What needs to be attended to first?
I think it's simple. It's the political will and to destroy the historical cleavages based on race and class, and also just to deal away with the skewed economic distribution. But I think the most important thing is the political will, as well also for business people from the Indian community, white community, not to be selfish, but to extend an olive branch to the condemned and to say, for us to live in harmony together, we need to build KwaZulu-Natal together. Because if they are going to continue being selfish and greedy, we are going to be in this inferno forever.
Chris, an inferno forever. I mean, you're coming at the back of that. We saw the, violent scenes last year. And I wonder then, if you're listening to that, calling for inclusivity and all of that, do you think we've seen the last? Because you're saying that it may not take the same form, but are you not concerned that
sure.
It may just be even more violent?
Yeah, there's plenty of reason for concern. What I would like to see, though, we don't have to accept this. There are things that can be done. One thing that I believe has never been addressed clearly, I would like to see youth development programs in each community addressing issues like the environment, the arts, music, addressing issues of gender in the community, with a central focus also on basic peer counselling, processes within communities that sustain and build up youth, linked also to sports development. These are big areas that we could be tackling. It would cost money, but the economic benefits, I think, would be huge in comparison to the costs.
And we'll see then if, when we talk to business later on, if this is something that they're willing to put their money on. But let me thank you all for your time this evening to give us a sense of the impact and how things are unfolding on the ground. That was Xolani Dube, political analyst, Jubera Institute, Chris Hampson, Director for Center of Nonviolence at the Durban University of Technology, and Sifiso Shangase, Provincial Office Manager for Santakwa in KwaZulu-Natal. Now, Francis, you've heard the impact on the ground, and we'll continue to look at this, Francis, as we look through the view of the Premier, but at the same time business. What does rebuilding of KwaZulu-Natal look like in a practical sense?
Thank you, Bongiwe. And remember that we've also asked you as our viewers, how has the July unrest and the KwaZulu-Natal floods affected your life? That's the question of the day. Let's take a look at some of your comments. Legasa, hi to you, Legasa. July unrest affected my life because all those lost jobs and their businesses are my fellow Africans. Indeed, it's not only the people in KwaZulu-Natal or even Gauteng. The number of youth unemployed was caused by July unrest between Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. Sifundo, the money which was supposed to be used for employment was used in stabilizing what was done in KwaZulu-Natal. Sad part, people who were igniting that are still eating cream alone, and those who physically participated to that are suffering even more. Daily evening, the effects are emotional. I'm upset at the slow trickle of prosecutions and unconvincing promises by the state to uncover the presumed masterminds of the unrest. Recently, we had the Durban July and horses had access to water, yet residents struggle. We should be ashamed. And finally, people shall govern. Hi to you. To be honest, July unrest affected me because I'm now unemployed because of what had happened at my workplace. I'm now without a job because my company was burnt to ashes. And yes, the death toll was massive, but there's also the toll on the daily lives. People like that viewer who lost their jobs as a result of their companies going down.